Barna research notes that most parents believe that raising children today is more complicated than it was when they were kids. That is something across the board that parents are consistent with. And this is all parents, not just Christians. But I think everyone realizes there's something about today that is attractive to our children, something that is pulling them. It's magnetic in our culture that is requiring a bit more vigilance with parenting. There's more opportunity for maybe the things that we're warning against when it comes to raising our children. And the number one reason in their research for that was technology and social media. So they did two questions. One was, is it more difficult to parent today than it was in previous generations? Now, I take that with a grain of salt because I think every generation has a giant violin that constantly plays it. Like, our lives are so much more difficult than everyone previous to us. So you take that with a grain of salt. But then the second question was, what's the number one reason why that's the case? And then it starts to make a little more sense because they're saying technology and social media. This is a difficult thing. So let's just say that we agree that technology is making our task as parents more difficult. Well, does that mean that we need to be more like this guy? Do we all just need to go full Amish on this whole thing? I'm never going to look like that. But if you mean in philosophy, then maybe to some extent. But no, I don't want to get into a whole class on who the Amish are and why I don't agree with a lot of what they do. But we don't necessarily want to rid ourselves of all modern conveniences because that ultimately wouldn't solve the problem. We're starting then to become some kind of legalist where we think as long as we take away all the bad things that we think are bad, and that's my problem with a lifestyle like this, is it's really difficult to be fully consistent with it because you can't possibly remove yourself from the world, let alone, we're not supposed to, let alone you can't remove yourself from yourself. And that's really the ultimate issue. Yes, there are things we should avoid and stay away from in order to not bring our lives into unnecessary temptation to sin. That's just wisdom. We're not going to let our kids play out in the street in a busy intersection. There are ways in which we protect them, and we'll get into some of that. But the bigger picture that I want to establish right from the beginning is this. We want to benefit from technology, not conform our life to technology. We want to benefit from technology, not conform our life to technology. There are great benefits to technology. I was having a conversation with Chad right before this class, talking about the benefits of AI and how that's being developed and how that actually can aid us in the future as parents if we use it correctly. So we want to be able to be good stewards of what God has given us, have dominion over the earth, and part of that is what we pull out of the earth in order to make these things. You think about that. With just the natural resources God has given us, that's how we have all the things that we have. Another way to think about it is we want to make technology our servant, not our master. Okay, these are a lot of what we're going to do here at the beginning of the class is talk about a biblical foundation, and maybe you call it a philosophical foundation for technology. Because if we just start getting into the tips and tricks of technology right from the beginning, without getting into why are we even having this conversation, I think we're going to miss the point. We will become like that Amish guy, just saying, let's just get rid of everything. Let's rip our house apart and take everything away that could possibly be in the category of technology. And I'm the first one to say, I'm all for some of that. But we need to be careful, and this is how we do it. We start to say things that are true and wise and good and not make things mutually exclusive that don't need to be. So we do want to craft a plan for technology, but before we get into that, before we start talking about your children specifically, I want you to tighten up your discipline with technology first. Because I think a big part of your plan for technology, it starts right with you. Now, if you're my age or around my age, you remember those commercials back in the day? They were about drug prevention. And remember there was this guy in the kitchen and he was cooking eggs, if I can remember correctly. And the dad's like, where did you get this stuff? And he's like, I learned it from you, Dad. I learned it from you. Right? The dad was doing drugs. Cooking eggs, doing drugs. It was a weird situation there. I'm not sure how he caught him, or there was no context to that commercial. It was very strange. But the point was, don't be a hypocrite. And we already talked about last week, hypocrisy is one of the greatest ways that you can fail as a parent. And you want to tighten up your discipline with technology so that you can then even say, imitate me to your children. If you're lacking in this area, it's going to be difficult to challenge your children to think that what you're saying is all that important. As we go through the following content, I want you to be thinking about how to apply this to yourself first. So even once we get past this point, we get into some other ways and to make a plan. Part of the process might be sitting down with you and your spouse, or if you're a single parent, sitting down with someone in the church and saying, I need to make a plan for myself first in order to fit my children under the bigger umbrella of the plan that we have within our home. So by thinking through the following imperatives, you will also have a better understanding of what it's like to be under the digital microscope, giving you compassion for your teen. If you've never put yourself under that microscope, it's going to be difficult to understand how they feel when you start to control their lives with technology, which you should to some extent. You are their parent, and while they're in your home, you want to be able to have oversight over this. It's good for them, and you want to teach them. Again, what did we say last week? They're not autonomous. They might be independent, but they're not autonomous. And so this is helpful, but you're not autonomous either. So you want to make sure that you feel the weight of this. First of all, monitor your screen time. Make sure you're doing this. If you're about to go and monitor your kids' screen time, make sure you're doing that yourself. The phones these days make it very easy for you to find out how you're spending your time on them. And it's only going to get easier with every new update. I just got an update on my phone recently, and it's getting easier. The data is being displayed better. It's easier to find out what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and where I need to grow and change. So monitor your screen time. Be aware of your smartphone pickups. So there's a way to actually track your pickups on, at least if you're using an iPhone, and that's what I'm using. And I know on there you can track your pickups, how many times you actually pick the phone up. So you want to track that just to know how often am I reaching for my phone. But then also I think there's an intangible way to think about this as well, and this is a conversation with your spouse, of just how often do you need to be touching your phone or reaching for it, or how often do you just kind of, does that make you feel better just to go like that? I mean, hey, I'm preaching to the choir. Preparing this was convicting this week. Like sitting there watching, the Detroit Pistons play, and I'm like, oh man, why am I keep touching my phone? There's a big play. Do I have to text Pastor Ben about that play? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But it's just how often, my wife gets up to go to the restroom. Am I immediately grabbing my phone to look, to scroll, to find? We have these tendencies, and so we need to audit that in our lives. Do your children see you touching it often, your phone, and using it too often? How are they viewing your relationship with your phone inside of your home? Because that's going to start shaping the way that they think they should have a relationship with this device. And that, I'm sure, is convicting for many of us. Next, you want to evaluate your reputation for digital discipline, similar to what I just talked about. But here's the question. Are you known for being a disciplined person with your phone, or would your kids say that it's a problem for you? And this is the most honest test, because being above reproach isn't just about what you think. It's about what others think. It's about what others view you as. It's your reputation. As I've heard Pastor Ben say before, reputations aren't given, they're earned. And so what is your reputation? And he often says that when I hit a bad golf shot. Or when I do something, I say, I always do this. Or he says, oh, you're going to do this next. And reputations aren't given, they're earned. Thanks, Pastor Ben. Appreciate that. But think about that. Think about what your kids would say. It might be a difficult pill to swallow to say, hey, kids, what do you think how do you think I think about my phone, my relationship with my phone? Something to think about. Next, audit your television time. Is television how you unwind or relax primarily? Now, there's obviously God's common grace that we get to experience things that even people 100 years ago didn't, and some of those things are a grace of God so that we can enjoy entertaining things that God has given us to enjoy. I myself, I love sports, but that can become too much. Can I find rest in the Lord, or do I only find it in those things where I'm turning the television on? Is it always on in your home? You've got to ask these questions, because we can be pendulum swingers. We can be people who are like, well, I watch the television too much, so what I'm going to do is remove it from my home. Okay, that's fine. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. But there are sometimes, I think, ways in which we can do that where we don't actually get to the heart of the issue. We have to say, what is it about this that's tempting me to have this on all the time? Or every night when I sit down with my spouse, am I turning this on? Are we relying upon this to find a time to wind down together? Okay, maybe that's the core issue that we need to resolve. And yes, that might result in taking it out of your home, but let's start there first. So once you've given your own digital habits an honest inspection, it's time to start building a plan for technology within your own home, especially for those within that preteen to teenage years. But before building the actual plan, it's important to frame your technology plan with firm convictions. We need to build our convictions first, or understand them, so that then we can build a plan upon those. It's easy to only live in fear of technology and make our decisions based on fear instead of based on faith. It's easy to run from technology because we overcompensate for the destructive potential that it holds. But technology is a great tool in the hands of someone desiring to use it for God's glory, which includes human flourishing under the banner of God's common grace. Technology is a means to an end. Technology becomes a problem when someone is using it as an end in itself, or as a means to receive something that only God can provide. So it becomes an idol. It becomes something where we're gaining comfort. We're gaining things. We're seeking peace. We're probably not gaining comfort or peace, but we're seeking that to find it from the things on this device. And that's the other thing too, is it's not the device itself, it's what it's giving us access to. Right? If we just walked around with squares or rectangles in our pockets that did nothing, well, none of us would be tempted to touch it all the time. Right? It's what it provides us. It's what it gains us access to. And so that's a way for us to determine where our heart's at there as well. Or do we use this device or these devices to access sin directly? So not only can it be something we're trying to replace God with, but also it's a means to find sin directly. So the question is, what end are you using technology as a means to accomplish? What are you using the technology for to accomplish? And that's why the following questions are important to answer, to help us understand why technology is something that can be used as a tool to accomplish the greater goals that God has given us as a family. So the first question that we must ask is, what is the goal of parenting? Just to even frame that up quickly, because we learned this in our first class together. We want our children to be, we summed it up as wise for salvation. And one of the ways that God gives us to do that is by raising them in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. We discussed this in weeks 2 and 3. If we view technology as something that can sit under the banner of discipline and instruction, then it becomes an asset if properly used, not just a liability. This reality also points to the fact that each child must be disciplined differently based on, or discipled really, differently based on what they will struggle with more. So each child is going to handle technology differently, just like you and your spouse probably handle technology differently. You may have one child that if you allowed them to just play games, video games, they would play for the rest of their life. They would never come out. They would, like a goldfish, if you keep feeding it, it'll just eat till it dies. It'll be like a goldfish in the technology world, your child would be. You might have one child like that, while another child doesn't struggle with that, but they would FaceTime with friends forever if you allowed them to, or they're tempted to just different ways to use the technology. So by reminding ourselves of the goal of parenting, we're able to then craft a plan that is a means to accomplish the most important goals that God has given us as parents. So we got to think about that in terms of what are we doing? What are we trying to do? What temptations are we seeing in the lives of our various kids? The next question we must ask is, who do you want your children to become? We ultimately want them to become mature Christians, men and women who desire God above all else. Matthew 22:37-40 says, "And he said to him, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets.'" And I need to remind myself of this often. This is my goal for my kids. This is what I ultimately desire for them, is for their affections for the Lord to be stirred, for them to love the Lord more than anything or anyone else. And so when I think of it in terms of that, now I approach this whole conversation differently. It's not about me creating some kind of Pharisaical system within my home. It's about me approaching their heart. So who do I want my children to become is an important question. We want their life to be filled with things that stir their affections for the Lord, as I've already said. We want them to be independent adults who can thrive on their own. Therefore, we need to teach them how to properly handle technology. But at the same time, as we spoke about last week, we don't want to desire autonomy. And technology has the potential to drive children to be autonomous from the family. That's another thing that technology can do, is they can live in their own world. Phones, along with social media, can provide an opportunity to live a life completely separate from real people. And I believe this is why we're seeing, the statistics are out there. You can go look for them. It's not hard to find that this next generation coming up is getting married less, having less relationships, actually sinning in less different in less ways than even the previous generation, having less sex outside of marriage, according to the statistics. And I think a lot of it's become because they're plugged into the matrix. They're living a life that is it's not reality, and this is a problem. And video games are often designed to take the player into a world that doesn't exist, living apart from reality, allowing the player to live completely autonomously from any other ruling figure. They're that by design. That's how you keep people there. That's how you get them to play games endlessly. In my day, you used to be able to come home sick from school and beat a game in a day, right? You could rent a game and beat it. Get to the last boss, beat it, be done. Now it's a lifelong quest. Endless quests to just play forever in a world that you don't live in. And this is a problem ultimately. More on that in a minute. Of course, on technology. If you know me well, you know I would bring up video games in a class like this. The third question that we need to answer is this: what do you want your home to represent? Our homes must represent what's biblical in terms of relationships, what they should look like. Philippians 2:3-5 should frame what we want our home to look like. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interest of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. Technology can pull you inward very fast. We want a home where everyone is aware of one another, driving us to serve one another's needs. If you can relate to this, you probably can relate to this as a parent. One of the greatest joys for me is when I see my whole family working to serve one another. When there's those rare moments where all the kids are just thinking rightly about that, or at least a portion of them that are present right in front of me, and I see it. I see them working together, serving one another. What a beautiful thing that is. That's the desire of Christ. That's what Paul's talking about to the Philippians. This is what I desire in the church. So this is what we desire in our home. Technology will divide your home if you let it. And I would pray none of you would have homes like this, but there are homes where you've got Sally up in her room on her computer or on her FaceTime with her friends for hours on end. You've got Johnny up in his room playing video games forever. You've got his brother in the other room who's on his phone just scrolling endlessly on social media and trying to be the next influencer. And then you got mom and dad who are off on their own in their own devices or doing whatever they're doing. It's dividing the family. I've heard of homes where people aren't even coming together for dinner. They're not coming together at all for anything because they're just grabbing their stuff and going back to their place. They're going back to their stuff, their devices, their screens, and living their lives completely separate. But we want our homes to be a place of community with good biblical communication. We want there to be good conversations. That's the good stuff. That's where you're going to live out Deuteronomy 6 and 7 ultimately. You're going to be having these conversations, talking about the Bible, working those things out. Bible study time is great. We should have those things. We should have Bible time. I've already talked about that in this class. But I think where it really sets in are those just normal conversations of biblical application in the life of a child. That's where all of the good stuff happens. And that's only going to happen when you're in community within your home. What about rest? Technology has the potential to make us restless. We need to teach our children how to rest. We want our home to be a place of rest. We want our home to be a microcosm of the church where there's fellowship, knowing and serving one another. We want real, honest interactions, expressing real affection for one another. We want discipleship. We want to live out the one another's to the extent that we can. We want to study the Bible and apply the Bible. And the final question that we need to answer, at least for today, is this: how do you want your family to spend their time? If you don't tell your time where to go, it will tell you where to go. It's just like a financial budget. You have to budget your time. Just like a good financial budget tells every dollar where it should go. It's taking into account every dollar and where it should be spent and having a place for it. Well, the same thing goes for our time. We need a plan for technology so that everyone can tell their time where to go, because these things and these things, they'll just take all of it if you let them. Not to mention the TV that's probably up in your home. It's going to take all of your time. It's designed to do that. All of the people, why are there so many people working for Facebook and for X, although a lot less people work in there that used to, or working for the marketing companies and the networks, and they're all working there to gain eyeballs and to keep them there. There's people who are learning social sciences just to make you stay there. And this has gotten brought up, even in a more public way when it comes to apps like Facebook, there's this moral dilemma of their whole design and business structure is to get people to stay there and waste their lives. And so they're having this conflict, this internal conflict of, is that ultimately right? Is that good for society? Because they're realizing we actually have the ability to impact society because there's so many people using these things. So what is the moral responsibility of these companies? And I'm not here to talk about that, but I'm just saying these are all designed to get you and keep you. And so if we don't have an idea of how we want to spend our time, it's not going to work out well. All right. Hopefully those questions help to stir up convictions that will frame how you shape your plan. So now let's shape a wise plan for technology. To shape this plan, I'm going to propose a series of questions. Part of the reason for questions is that some of the decisions you make will be specific to your home. So for me to get up here and say, here's exactly what all of you should do next week, I don't think that's exactly a responsible way to teach this class from my point of view. I think all that I can do is say, here's what the Bible says about how we should parent. Here's what the Bible says about how to be wise with the things we've just asked questions about. And here's some questions for you to consider prayerfully and in discussion with your spouse. Now, I'm going to give some suggestions in a more bold way than others based on what I think might be a little closer to the side of wisdom. But I think this is important for you to wrestle through, because here's the thing that I know we all want. We all really want the silver bullet, if we're honest. What we want is we want someone to develop some kind of app or robot or AI that just takes over our entire home and all of our devices and keeps our children safe. I mean, if you told me that was possible, I'd sign up for it. If that was really possible, that there was something that could anticipate the moves of all of my kids with technology and come in and stop them and move this over and cut this thing off. And honestly, that's probably coming someday, some version of that. But if we just relied on those things, we would not be living out the responsibility God has given us to parent our children. Because here's what I'm going to say before we jump into this. This takes a lot of work. And in this way, I would probably say this part of protecting our children from certain temptations is harder now than it probably was before. And you're going to just have to commit to working hard as a parent. It's really, really hard work. And I think more so for maybe some of your children than others. There's ways in which they'll be tempted in different ways. And you've probably already seen it's hard work in your life to be on top of this and to be honest about how you deal with this. I mean, I won't won't do a show of hands, but I'm sure there's plenty of people in the entire church that if I said, when you get done with a difficult task, what do you typically enjoy doing? It's probably sitting down, opening up your phone, and catching up on social media. I call it the new smoke break. And it's probably worse for you, to be honest. You're probably better off just handing out a bunch of packs of cigarettes and smoking at the end of the day. When you think about the spiritual implications of what we're doing and the time that we're wasting, of course, it's way worse for you. Don't go do that. I'm not condoning smoking cigarettes. I'm just trying to make the point that we sometimes don't understand the weight or the danger of this. And we're looking for that break, for that relaxation, for that comfort that we find from these things. And that's a problem. But we need to, all that to be said, as we walk through this, we just need to be honest about what our family really needs. And we need to do the hard work of sitting with our spouse, having long conversations, praying about this, having the same conversation with the same children over and over again, and digging into their heart to better understand how to help them. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. And for some of you that just have little kids right now, and this is coming one day, what I want to say is the more you focus on those three weeks that we got into at the beginning, the more this is going to be easier for you. Because if you have a regular pattern in your life of instructing your children and discipling your children for the glory of God to the end that they might walk with Christ, you're going to have the type of relationship that's going to be much easier to dive into what we're about to do to develop a plan. So just be encouraged in that way. And even though I say it's really hard, don't be afraid of it. God will give you the grace that's needed to walk through it. Okay? So, first of all, at what age will we allow smartphones? This is a conversation you need to have and you need to decide. The general idea that I've seen, I read a bunch of stuff preparing for this week. I already had my answer, but I wanted to make sure I was listening to other people out there that are much wiser than I am, writing articles, writing books, and processing through all the data. And everybody, without question, says, hold off as long as possible. Hold off as long as you possibly can to give your children smartphones. And you'll see, when they get to a certain age, there's now even more of a need for a phone or for texting. If your kids are going to watch your other kids, your oldest kids are going to watch them, you're going to let them stay at home. And I don't have a phone in my home. I don't know if you do. Don't have a landline. Or your kids are going to go away and you want to track their location and you want to some of these things are very useful. And there are phones that you can get that look like smartphones, but they're more dumb phones and they're highly controlled. And we'll get into that in a moment too, where there's some different software that you can use in order to make the phone a little dumber and give the access to the things that you desire for them to have, but keep away from some of the things that you don't want them to have access until they're older. But the biggest thing is just hold off as long as you can. And no matter how long you hold off, most children, unless they're just very different in a good way, where they just don't push against you as much, most children are going to be frustrated with you, no matter how long you wait. Because they're going to say, my friends have it. I'm going to be made fun of. I'm not going to have what everybody, I need this. They're going to start using the word need, and they're going to start looking and speaking like Gollum, right? Like, I need my precious. Like, in what did I say before? Need is fertile soil for an idol. And so they're going to say, I need this. And you can use that to teach them about about the fact that they don't need it. And teach them about what needs are and why you're processing through this. Have those conversations with your kids. Next, who owns my child's smartphone? And I would say, as long as your child is not an adult and they're within your home, right from the beginning, make it clear that you own that phone, that they're borrowing that phone. So if you're giving them a phone, they own it, or you own it, they're borrowing it. And establish right from the beginning what that means. I have the ability to check on this phone, to open it up, to have your password at any time, and to look at anything I want to on this phone. This is my phone, and the only reason you have this phone is in order to accomplish some very practical things in your life. And I want want them to have that mindset that this phone is a pragmatic tool to accomplish things that we need to accomplish within the family. And yes, there are some benefits to this as you get older. You'll be able to keep in touch with your friends. You'll be able to talk to them, and that's cool. That's fine. But we want you to know, again, you're not autonomous. We want to give you the ability to be independent as much as we can in the right areas, in the right ways, but you're not autonomous. And here's the thing. Develop that conversation early so it never feels like you're snooping on them. Because we don't want to establish this idea that, mom and dad are kind of deceitful. No, we want them to know when we're doing it. Hey, I'm going to look at your phone. But you have the right to do that. And you've established that right from the beginning so that you're not fighting that later. Now, if you're somebody who didn't do that and you're on the other side of it, that's a little bit harder to correct it. But there are ways that you can still do that. You can even go to your child and say, hey, I've been thinking a lot about your phone and everything, and I think I made a mistake. And even share that with them. And I didn't have the wisdom at the time to know to talk to you about this and to walk through this in this way, but I think there's some real wisdom in us having this kind of relationship when it comes to your technology and for me to be able to see these things. And as your parent, I want to walk through that with you, and that might not go well. With most kids, that's not going to go well. But here's the thing. You want to know when I deal with adultery cases in the church, you want to know where this often gets really, really dicey is with phones and with spouses even having access to each other's phones. We don't want to create a world in which we have autonomy from everyone. We don't want to create a world where your kids grow up and they have their own private life on their own devices and never to share that with their spouse. There should be an openness there and a transparency, because this is where a lot of these things start, is people getting curious and going and finding things they shouldn't find and engaging in relationships they shouldn't engage in. And of course, it's not the phone that did it. Ultimately, when adults are experiencing adultery or going through that, it's the sin inside of them. It's their wicked heart that drew them ultimately, and they're culpable for that. But every time this comes up, there's a conversation where, I go, how did you start to understand this was a problem? Well, he started being very protective over his phone. He didn't want me to see anything on it. Okay. Trace that all the way back to the kids that we want to raise as adults. We want to make sure they understand that's not okay. And also establish what they're going to use it for. So if it's your phone that you're letting them borrow, how are you going to use this? So that way, let's say you're giving it to them at age 13, I don't know, I'm just throwing a number out there. You're giving it to them at age 13, but it's a stripped down, kind of more of a dumb phone. You're using it for babysitting and for other things, whatever. And then, when they get to be 16 or 17 and they're still in your home, you've already established what this phone is for, that it's yours, and what the purpose of it is. So as they start to want to use it for more social media or things, you can say, we're not doing that. You're not going to have a social media account. It's not something we're going to do because this phone isn't for that. So it gives you an opportunity to have those conversations because you've pre-negotiated the conflict. Conflict is so much easier to navigate when you've pre-negotiated it. You've already established what the rules of the game are. 3, when will smartphones be allowed? So creating an opportunity, creating a somewhat of an established expectation in your home of when smartphones will be allowed. So that's up to you in your home, but things like they're never going to be at the dinner table. They're always going to be going back to their home. There's a place in our house where we've kind of bought one of those docking stations where you can plug a ton of different devices into, and that's their home. And if we find your phone is not there for whatever reason, you're going to have a consequence because unless you ask, that phone is not leaving that location. Because we're not going to walk around with our phones everywhere as if, especially as a teenager, as if you need to be reached. You're not that important. I know, I'm telling you, man, one of the rules that we've recently even established in our home is no more group chats. Because group chats make our children feel like they have to respond. And once you get into a group chat with 20 different girls, that thing never stops going off. They left their phone, they took it off Do Not Disturb one night, and we were sitting there together after the kids went to bed, and it was like, zzz, 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 zzz. I'm like, what is that? It was coming in so hot that it sounded like an alarm. And it had like a rhythm to it. It was like, just, this is crazy. What are these people doing? And it's about nothing. They're not getting anything done. If anything, they're stirring one another on to hate and bad works, right? Not love and good works. And so we've recently said, hey, that's not something you're going to engage in. It's just too distracting for you. And you can see the anxiety in our girls. They want to go and they want to, I'm fear of missing out. I need to be a part of this. So that's part of this. When will they be allowed? As one person put it, I think it was Andy Crouch was reading in his book, he talked about, the phones go to bed before we do and we wake up before our phones do. That's one of the things that they've established in their home. So it's going to go away earlier in the day, earlier in the night, and then we're not bringing those. We'll get to this in a minute, but we're not bringing those with us to bed. Those are going to stay in that spot, and then you're going to come back to it. I just think about our kids. So I didn't have a smartphone. They came out in 2008-ish, right? So I didn't have a smartphone until I was 28, and I think actually we have an opportunity with our kids to teach them these rhythms, to learn, to ingrain habits, to put phones in their place, both physically and metaphorically, to learn that these things don't control me. This is a device that I'm using for a purpose. It's not something just that I'm not going to think about it. The next thing, because when I was 28, I just got a smartphone, and then all these social media things come out and everything, and I'm just responding to it. I'm not thinking proactively about how to live with this thing. And I was a Christian for 6 years at that point. And, having to learn this over time, I think many of us are in the same boat where this thing kind of happened to us and we're all learning how to deal with it. Whereas now we have a chance to reverse engineer what this is for our kids and say, we're going to teach you, because you're not going to live in a world without smartphones again. It's just not going to happen. Heaven's coming, my friend. Yes, Christ will come back, we'll be going up in the air, and all of our phones will be falling out of our pockets. Take me, Lord. They need to redo Left Behind, right? With all the phones falling everywhere and people dying because phones are hitting them in the head. Next. Where will our children's screens be stored? I already talked about this, but just to mention, not in the bedroom. Just keep phones out of the bedroom. just in general. It's just not a good idea. Buy your kids alarm clocks. They still sell them. They still do on Amazon. They sell them other places too, but I mean, let's be honest. Where else are we going to shop? Walmart. There you go. You got to go there though. I guess you can, no, okay, you can have it delivered, but it's not as easy. I don't get paid by Amazon or anything like that, so. Yeah, I have some affiliate links that I'll be sending out to you guys with alarm clocks. It all goes to build my church, so. So yeah, just think through those things. Again, like, but mom, but dad, I need it. I need it there. What if, I'm waiting on this important text from so-and-so. What if I get it real late and I need to do something for school or something in my, I'm sorry, we got to be better at planning then so that we can get those things done before you're going to bed. Now, bedtime's a great time to truly wind down and truly rest your mind, to read, to spend time in the Word, whatever that looks like, but no phones there. What is allowed on our children's phones? And that, again, I'm not going to get too much into this. It would take too much time, and I think this is really your department as parents. But I put on there some apps for consideration. Just if you want to check these out, I've only used one of them. I used RPact for a little bit. We're actually utilizing quite a bit in the latest updates. I think it's mostly in the latest updates for the iPhone at least. There's a lot of controls you can actually do through the family function within screen time. So there are things you can do through the screen time interface on your iPhone to control the data or what you're allowing your kids to do, both how much time on their phones, but also what they can access. So check that out. That's free. If you have an iPhone and your kids have an iPhone, then you can basically put them on your family plan and walk through it that way. But they're just, the way that I would say it is these are as bad as they're ever going to be. So some of this stuff, I was talking with Chad beforehand, and we were saying we're both guys that don't struggle with technology. I mean, he works in technology. I've never really had a problem with technology. It just comes naturally. And a lot of these things are hard to use. So, there's a learning curve to it, but they're getting better. So, and even I think the one Bark is using AI to try to understand better what's actually going on and make better decisions or prompts to you to figure out what you would do. And I think that's the way of the future, actually, is that a lot of this stuff, that's where AI will be really useful, is to give you real-time data on what's going on so that you can have real conversations about what's happening and control it from that way. But if all you're doing is controlling and not having conversations, then you're missing an opportunity here. So you really do need to get to the heart of it. So you can put all these on phones. You can utilize that all you want. There's also a company called Gab. They make the dumb smartphones that only do so many things that you let your children use, and it looks like a smartphone. So it's they're not going to get made fun of for not having one. Once the kids find out they have a Gab phone, they'll get made fun of, but that's a whole other thing. They should get used to being made fun of, right? I got made fun of a lot as a kid, and it was very hurtful. No, I'm just kidding. But it also, looking back, I mean, God used a lot of that in my life to rely upon Him and to bring me to saving faith. And I think as you, being proactive Christian parents, you can utilize those things to, hey, you think you look weird now. Wait until you go out into the world. You look weird at plants and pillars. Please, son or daughter. Wait until you go out into the workforce and into the world and how weird you're going to look if you're living the Christian life correctly. You should look weird. You should make decisions that your unbelieving in-laws or whoever you're talking to are going, what are you doing? Are you in a cult? The people, the more that you strive for holiness, the more people think that. And so you want to get your children to see, no, striving for holiness is an unpopular opinion. It's an unpopular position, yes, even in plants and pillars. Because a lot of those kids are not saved, and they're sinners. And they're not gonna understand. And especially, here's the other thing. This is something that you need to teach your kids as well, is that one of the reasons that Christians even get the most flack oftentimes from other Christians that aren't quite as conservative as them is because they're convicted. They don't want somebody raising the bar. It's kind of like the employee who's like, why are you working so hard, man? You're going to make us all look bad. Like, well, why don't you want to work hard for this company? Like, pays our bills and employs us. That's a horrible way to think. So your kids are going to automatically, even other kids, they're going to say, like, your parents are weird. They have weird rules. And they're going to be frustrated by that and take that out on your kids. But teach them that this is the way that the world will work because we live in a world that's not perfect. And that people are processing their emotions in their hearts in live real time when they're convicted about things. And to teach them to have compassion. Teach them to have pity upon their peers that speak that way. And not to be, on the one hand, self-righteous and look down upon them, but on the other hand, not to get angry and try to repay evil for evil. And I think when it comes to technology, this is where a lot of that can happen. But why don't you have the right phone? Why don't you have the right social media accounts? Why aren't you allowed to do these things? And help them to be able to express why. And over time, I've actually seen that pay off. I think when our kids get older, if we're really saying those things with a genuine desire to explain biblically what we're doing, there are times when they come around and go, I get it. I see that. Or they'll defend you because they see that you actually do care for them. Next, how much time can the kids spend on screens? You know, I think this is something to talk about as a couple and work through. And this is why it's so important to go back to, what are you doing? What are you doing when it comes to screens? And be reasonable with your children when it comes to this. But it does go back to, what is the whole reason for having this device? It's a utility. It's something that we're using to accomplish something. And so that should drive how you come to the answer to that. Number 7, when will the TV be on and off? I think this is how you develop your plan as well, by asking this question. There should be a proactive approach to when the TV is off. And this starts at a very young age, actually. I think you can start to develop a technology plan even with the smallest of kids. I kind of tongue-in-cheek brought up the whole idea of babysitting your kids with screens at restaurants or at your home. But to bring that back, you can start to help your children understand what the television is even for in your home from a very young age, long before they have a tablet or a phone. You don't want your TV to be something that's babysitting your children. So that's a great thing to audit as a couple, is are we just putting the TV on in order to make our lives easier? Again, there are times for that. There are times when there's sickness or there's difficulty in the home, and that's a grace that you have that there in order to function. But you should be very weary of it becoming a habitual thing to have that on all the time. Or is it just on all the time? It's on every night. And I have to watch this because it's like, you know, it doesn't matter the sport. I like the playoffs, right? And every time, there's always a playoff. I think Christina learned that early in her marriage. She's like, I thought that season was over. Yeah, but the next one's on now. It's NFL now. You know, or it's the NBA final. I don't watch the NBA all year, but then the finals come on and I watch it. But you got to be careful because, you know, there's certain seasons where that can be on every night, and you've got to be careful. So this starts with mom and dad deciding when is it going to be on, when is it going to be off. Even what are some of our rules around that? Are we going to come home every night and every time the kids go to bed watch something? Or are we going to kind of set this aside as something we do every once in a while, a rhythm to enjoy together, a movie or something that we want to enjoy? All right, what should we think about video games? Okay, I want to read something to you. This was out of the TechWise family book that I mentioned earlier from Andy Crouch, and this is really based on data from Barna Research. That book that he wrote is helpful because it has a lot of Barna research within it, okay? So it says this: children are spending an average of 5 hours on an electronic device, tablet, phone, computer, every day. That's already crazy. Their most common activity, playing video games. Nearly 2/3 of parents say their children spend most of their time on an electronic device playing video games, 64%, compared to 4 in 10 who mostly do homework, 41%, 1/3 who are using other types of entertainment, 35%, and 1/3 who are chatting with friends or family, 34%. About 3 in 10 are either using social media or reading. Even at 5 hours a day, most parents say they are limiting the amount of time their kids spend on electronic devices. Millennial parents, perhaps because they have younger children or perhaps because they are more likely to be immersed in and therefore experiencing their own angst around electronic usage, are more likely than Generation Xers or Boomer parents to limit their children's time on electronic devices. Limiting time seems more popular than eliminating the devices. Most kids have phones. Nearly 9 in 10 parents with teenagers say their teen has a phone, and just under half of parents of preteens say their child does. So I want to point out just what it said there at the beginning. Just nearly 2/3 of parents say their children spend most of those 5 hours on an electronic device playing video games. And I want to go back to what I said earlier about the fact that video games are designed to immerse yourself in another world where you are the center of the universe. And what are we trying to teach our kids about the world and about their life and about who God is? That it's not about them. And so there is a sense here where you've got to be careful. And you've got to be really mindful of how video games are being used within your home. One of the best things, and I'm not going to say too much more on that. I'm going to let the Lord work on you on that and with your discussions with your spouse or whoever you need to talk to. But I would just say pray about that. One of the best decisions we ever made was when our oldest was around 14. We got rid of the gaming console that we had in our house. Just full sale. Just got rid of it. We sat him down and we said, listen, we can tell that this is something that is difficult. It pulls you. And when you're on it, the games you're attracted to are the ones where you're the hero. And we explained all this and we walked through it and we took our time. We had hard conversations and we got to the point where he was in agreement and he went along with it. And I think years later, he thanked us for that, right? Because there was such a pull to that, to use time in that way, to escape in that way. And a lot of times what kids will do is they will actually use video games to try to combat their anxiety. And I think adults do this as well. I find a lot of adult men are actually tempted to the same thing when they have video games still in their life, is that they're tempted to utilize video games, not for a source of just common, once in a while, entertainment with friends or whatever that looks like or with their kids, but actually as an escape. So watch out for that because this is really antithetical to the gospel and to gospel living. Because what can happen is, just like social media or content that you watch on a television, you can sear your conscience. If your conscience is saying, I should be about other people, or I should be thinking less of myself, we read Philippians 2. I should be thinking more highly of others and less of myself. I should have self-control. And you're immersing yourself in a world where all that's out the window for a period of time. What are you doing? You're training your conscience to be dulled to those ideas. So watch out for that. All right. So ask important questions like these in order to shape your plan. You're going to then have some solid thoughts on what you want to do, okay? At that point, you want to make sure there is good communication about your plan. So you're going to develop a plan, some kind of idea of what you're going to do in your home, and then you want to communicate well first to each other, and then you want to communicate that to your children. Sit down, navigate this in a calm way, in a way where you're talking about the why behind the what, biblically speaking, and walking through it as a family. If you start to try to implement this in ways on the fly while your kids are in the middle of doing stuff, it's going to be difficult. You want to be able to communicate well to them. Now, it's one thing to develop a plan for how you're going to use technology as a family, but you're raising adults, and they will one day leave your home. So I'm convinced that it's just as important to live a life that pushes technology to the fringes. Again, I love technology. I love smart home stuff. I love things that are integrated, the Internet of Things. I like all that stuff. I like having the convenience of technology. But I think even the more that I walk with Christ and the older I get, I do love living a life that pushes technology to the fringes. And so it's kind of this tension that exists where I'm going to use these things for tools to make what I'm doing maybe simplified, maybe easier, not for the sake of laziness, but for the sake of efficiency, for proficiency, to serve the church more. But I'm also going to find my rest and my rhythms apart from technology, okay? When you live a life that pushes technology to the fringes, it's going to help develop habits and affections. Those are two things that are so important. Habits and affections that will stick with your children long after they have left. You want your children longing for those sweet moments within your home where they developed habits that were godly, that were based on community, based on the way God designed them to flourish and to enjoy life, enjoy God, and affections for the things that are beautiful and good that God has created. And at the same time, this is going to help you live a life that uses technology as a means to good godly ends, as a supplement to your life and not the center of your life. So a couple of things to think about. Create spaces for creativity within your home. I'm a big fan of investing your money into this. Invest finances into places within your home for your children. Now, you're probably naturally doing that if you're one of those homeschooling parents in the room. But continue to do this. Invest in good things to help your children learn to be still, be quiet. One of my favorite things is, my day off is Monday, so when I wake up on a Monday, and, the little kids especially, every single Monday will ask, hey, can we watch a movie? And I'll say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not doing that. Okay. And they'll go off, and then an hour later, I see one kid outside catching bugs. See another kid over here opening up a book or playing a puzzle. Or, the little kids are like making all kinds of noise, like pretending that they're animals and they're doing stuff. They're using their imagination and their creativity, and they're learning to just, there's a calmness in the home. There's a restfulness in the home. When that TV is on, there's an anxiety level that is produced within the home. You can feel it. There's a sense that we're all plugged into something and it's sucking our life away, right? Now, I like movies. Before I wanted to be a pastor, before I started my business, before being a pastor, I wanted to be a movie maker. I like movies. But we need to be careful, again, about what we're using this for, where we're finding creativity, where we're finding rest. If we're only engaging in other people's creativity and never creating ourselves, we're going to be anemic. We need to be creating things. We need to be helping our kids to live in the image of God. God is a creator. He's created us to be creators. And this is a good thing for us to do. Fill your home with books. Fill your home with books. I am 100% fine with people dying with books on their shelf they've never read. I think that's totally fine. Somebody else will read them someday. I have no problem with this whatsoever. Now, you may be bothered in your conscience by that, and I don't want to force you to do something that you don't feel comfortable with, but I'm completely fine with that. Just filling your home with books, giving the opportunity for your children, for you to read good books. And I think this goes with the first point, because this gives you the opportunity to point and direct your children to books. Also, point and direct yourself to books. If Christina and I have a commitment to not turn the television on every night, well, that's going to push us to books. Because as much as we love books, we still have a flesh. Sometimes you just want the easy thing, right? You just want to sit back and let something entertain you. And so sometimes there's a discipline to even say, I'm going to get into a good book. And by the time I get a couple pages in, I'm like, oh, this is great. This is ultimately what I need. But fill your home with good books. This pushes technology to the fringes. It makes a statement to your whole family. Encourage going outside as much as you possibly can. I mean, these are no-brainer things, but it's just a good reminder to get outside, to go for a walk as a family. Just after dinner, I mean, it can't get much better than it is right now. So after dinner, let's go for a walk. Let's just walk together. And that's a great opportunity for conversations and for the family to make memories together. Have regular uninterrupted meals together. Sitting down with nothing else around, just conversation, having a meal goes a long way. I've already brought that up before in this class. Do Bible time without the use of technology. So I personally think, and this is why I'm working so hard to try to get the Bible time guide printed, because I would love in our home if we never pulled out a device to do something like Bible time. I want to pull out my Bible, or if I'm going to read a book I want to pull out a real book. There's something about that helps my children even see that this is important. There's something to that. And you can do what you want to do. I'm just saying that there is a message that sends. There's no way of getting around these being in our lives, or tablets or computers or whatever. So if we can find moments where we don't have to pull them out, wouldn't we want to? Wouldn't we want to have those moments where we can do that? Use discipline to push past boredom. So a big thing that comes up with kids when they look at the world around them and then they don't have something easy like a screen is they'll say, but I'm so bored. And the thing is that you can say, that's okay. You need to learn how to be bored. So do I. There's times when I have work to do at my job that I have to sit down in a chair and not move and get it done. I just have to. I've got things to prepare. I've got things to read, things to write, meetings to prepare for. And if you don't prepare yourself in the moments where you could do anything you want to do, by learning how to have discipline and not seek the easy way out of boredom, you're not going to be as disciplined in those other areas. So I think teaching our kids to push past boredom. Just like I said, they'll ask for the movie and I say no, and then an hour later, they've pushed past the boredom. And now they're easily engaging in good things that are restful. Utilize the car for good conversations. So don't allow the car to become where everybody pulls out their devices. So if dad's the one who's driving the car, mom, when you get in the car, don't pull out your phone right away. Well, I'm a passenger. He's driving. So I can just pull out my phone and I can scroll and I can catch up and I can be on my phone. That sends a message to your kids that car time is time to be on devices. And as your kids get older, they're not allowed to do that. We're in the car, we're having conversations, we're talking with one another, and we're going to utilize this time where we're a captive audience to develop our relationships. Value moments of human interaction. And this is a combatant to social media. So one of the ways we can set our kids up to not even desire social media so much is to develop good, genuine relationships within your home. Work at that. But we want human interaction. And I'd say this is a big reason why you should be very involved in the church and your kids should be very involved in the church. To learn how to be around people. To learn how to live in a crowd of people. And you know what? We can put labels on each other, say we're an introvert or extrovert, whatever. Everybody in the body of Christ needs to learn how to do this. Needs to learn how to be around people and have real human interactions. Look people in the eye, shake their hand, say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, or whatever you want to tell your kids to say to people. To be respectful, to be able to have conversations with adults as much as you can. It's not a perfect science. It's more of an art form to get your kids to do all that. But the more you get them involved in church and getting them interacting with adults and other kids, that's going to be a great thing for them. And do that same thing within your home. Make church community the primary community. And again, this is to combat social media. So I think whatever you're doing in your life, where it could give an opportunity for community outside of the local church, that's fine. But make church the primary community. Because there's no other organization in the world that's called to do and can do what the church is doing. And that's just that's clearly outlined within the scriptures. And so you want your kids to grow up into adults who value the church more than any other organization on the planet. Because this is what God has done. He's designed it to be set aside to do the work that only it can do. And I don't have time to re-preach the sermons through the Build My Church campaign, but if you haven't heard those, go back and listen to those. They're very compelling. Pastor Ben did a great job of outlining that. Next, introduce ways for everyone to say no to themselves. Okay, I talked about stirring up our children's affections for the Lord earlier. The other side of the coin is the idea of keeping their appetites at bay. So we want their affections to be growing for the Lord, but we want to keep their appetites at bay, because oftentimes when technology becomes a problem, it's because people have not learned to say no to themselves, to control their appetites. 1 John 2:15-16 says, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world." You can help them control their appetites by, as your kids get older, including them in fasting. And that means you're going to have to fast. This is a great way to control your appetites, because you're literally doing that, your actual appetite. But you're learning to say no to yourself. I mean, do an audit of your life. How often do you actually say no to yourself? We have conveniences everywhere all the time. And we can say yes to ourselves almost all the time. We have convenience stores, we have grocery stores, we have fast food, if we just crave something, we can go get it. We can find something on our phone or ask Gemini where to get it or whatever. We can find it and we can get it. And so we need to learn how to say no. Maybe one of the ways is by fasting, or help them to be disciplined with food, what they eat. Again, that goes back to you control the menu in your home. You tell them what's going on with that. Disciplined with entertainment or free time as well. And this goes back to even when I was talking about earlier classes of prioritizing church, prioritizing community. If you really want your children to start to learn the rhythms of using their time wisely and saying no to themselves, then you're going to have to set the pace for that with even how you commit to things. So I want to close by talking about your child's heart in relation to technology. In many ways, there may be no greater pull than technology in the life of a teen. Not because of technology itself, but what it represents. It can often provide great temptation in the areas where they are already prone to wander. It's basically a multiplying agent. So use this reality to your advantage by leaning into their heart. Technology can start to expose things that you really need to work on in their heart, and maybe in ways you never would have before. So this is where it can be an asset. You want to disciple heart issues that technology draws out. So just really quickly as we close, just a few things to think about. Fear of man. Does your child fear pleasing people more than God? To the point where it controls their life. Now, they may not be a Christian, but even so, you can help them to see that they are being ruled by what people think of them. And technology starts to open that door when it comes to the way they're using it or not using it. What about discontentment? That they're not content with what they have. They always talk about what they don't have. And you can, when you're withholding certain things with technology, there's going to always be people out there where they have something they don't. Which leads me to covetousness. That now they have a strong desire. They focus and fixate. So discontentment is, I'm not happy with what I have. Covetousness is, I'm thinking about and I'm constantly wanting and ruminating, meditating on what I want that I don't have. Okay? And then that leads to envy. I actually hate the people who have what I have. I'm despising those other people, looking down upon them because they have what I don't have. And then I think a big one that technology can bring out is anxiety. Anxiety, depression, and suicide are at an all-time high among teenagers. More than I think ever has been recorded since we recorded these types of things. And I believe it's all due to the access that we have with these phones, with these devices, because it's an agent, it's a multiplying agent. Teens already struggle with anxiety. They're already struggling with how to control their thoughts, what they think about. And now they're given social media accounts where, think about it like this, scrolling. Why does social media provide so much anxiety? Because when you're scrolling, you're trying to find something that you can never find. You're looking for something that's not findable. That's by design, like I said earlier. that wells up in you anxiety. You don't even know why you're there, why you can't quit, what you're looking for. But that next reel pops up, that next post pops up, and you got to wait, that one looks good. I might as well watch that. Well, that one, and before you know it, it's an hour that has gone by, and you are riddled with anxiety. And that is part of the conscience that I talked about as well, because they're seeing things that are starting to laugh at things that they normally wouldn't laugh at. They're giving over to their flesh. And that can lead to ultimately to depression. So anxiety, they're trying to constantly think about and solve things that they can't solve, and they're letting their mind race and not controlling their thoughts. But depression is now they hyperfixate on the negative. So we've seen this. We've seen the kids get into certain things online, and now they're focused on all of the bad things about themselves that people are telling about them. They're talking to them about. So they're focused on all the negative and all the bad things, and now they're replaying that tape all the time. And that leads them to great depression. So we need to counsel them biblically away from those things, teaching them how to think, teaching them how to process these things biblically and put good thoughts in their minds, Romans 12:2. So as we close, as we started with, parents are saying this is the hardest it's ever been to lead teenagers especially. And a lot of that's, by their account, due to technology. But I hope, as you can see here, this is not just a liability, but it's an asset. Use it. Be proactive. Start these conversations now. Sit with your spouse, walk through these application questions, and really work these things out so you can be on top of it and you can start to be proactive in a way that's discipling your kids through technology, not just protecting them from it or being fearful of it. Let me pray for you for that as we close. Lord, I thank you for this time together. I pray that in this room and whoever's hearing my voice would represent families that really fight this battle well. Lord, there's no perfection to this. There's only faithfulness. Because we know that even with the best plan, things are going to happen. And I pray you just encourage those families that might be going through that right now, where they have a plan and they're working it and they're being faithful, but there's sin. And I just pray that you'd encourage them to keep going, keep being faithful, Lord, and that we would see a whole generation of people that are not slaves of technology, but masters of it for your kingdom, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.